change our name in the meeting if that's all right. Okay.
Thank you. I was able to do it.
Hey, John, we are all set with the recording.
Great, thank you. All right, Josh, take it away.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Sun, along with John Law, and we're with the Department of Planning and Development. Welcome to the May 11th, 2022 meeting of the Committee on Design. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the DPD's YouTube page. To our esteemed committee, thank you for volunteering your time to be a part of this advisory group. To members of the public who are joining us, what you will see today and at future Committee on Design meetings are projects currently under review by DPD staff. The committee is a voluntary advisory body of design professionals that provide their expertise on design issues. This committee is not a substitute for Plan Commission, as it is not a forum for public debate, nor is the advice of the committee legally binding. It is the hope that today's discourse will lead to recommendations that will elevate the design excellence of the city of Chicago. These recommendations will be forwarded to DPD staff for consideration as they review these projects for Plan Commission and subsequent approvals. I believe we have everybody, John, right? So maybe I'll go ahead and continue on to roll call.
Great, and I'll take attendance while you read off. That's all right.
All right. Sarah Beardsley.
Present.
Reed Kroloff.
Here.
Brian Lee.
Here.
Juan Moreno. John Ronan.
Here.
Ann Thompson. Leslie Roth.
Here.
Anna Ishikawa. Theaster Gates. Bob Faust. Renald Mitchell.
Here.
And Guacolda Reyes.
Here.
Great. And then, okay, so John, do you see, so Ann Thompson is here.
Yep, got that, thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's just get into it. To members of the public, you are welcome to begin dropping comments and questions into the Q&A box. Committee members are invited to review the information during and after each presentation and incorporate the comments into the discussion. We will not be reviewing questions or comments from the public individually. To the applicant teams, please clearly state your name and your relation to the project prior to speaking. You have 15 to 20 minutes to present your proposal, and I will keep time. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after each presentation. So we'll now move to the regular agenda. The first item, 3950 North Damon and 3959 North Lincoln Avenue, located in the 47th Ward, is a proposal for an approximately 300 unit, 100 parking space transit-oriented development, or TOD, located at the Six Corners intersection of Lincoln, Damon, and Irving Park in North Center. Whoever's running the presentation, feel free to pull it up at this point. The project includes two proposed buildings on the southeast and southwest corners of the intersection. The proposal at 3959 North Lincoln includes the adaptive reuse of an existing historic bank building, and the proposal at 3950 North Damon includes a large new construction mixed-use building. The proposed project is located within a growing TOD district. All three streets, Lincoln, Damon, and Irving Park, are pedestrian streets, which have specific requirements and standards as described in the zoning code.
If you guys are not ready to move, and she has you as a consented party.
And that's all I got.
You guys can each other's time.
Is Michael
So there's a
Berkshire?
Am I running the presentation?
I'm doing land.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know that.
Oh, you're fine.
Well, he's pulling that up, Josh. I can, this is Katie Jenke-Dale from DLA Piper, the zoning attorney. I can give a brief introduction. As I mentioned, my name is Katie Jenke-Dale, zoning counsel, along with Rich Clouder for this matter. We wanted to give a quick introduction to this project, although we don't usually speak in this committee as lawyers. We usually leave it to the architects. We thought because of the background and the history here, it would make sense for us to kind of give a little bit of an introduction. We've been working with the community stakeholders on this project for quite a while. And that's included going through certain plan iterations that were rejected by the community that we're going to share with you today. We've also received formal feedback from the North Center Neighbors Association and Bell School. We'll show how we've addressed NCNA's letter from February throughout this presentation. Bell School also has expressed an interest in how this project could help bolster its enrollment, which included us adding some family-sized units to Damon, which the Damon portion of the plan development, which falls within its catchment area. This is a really unique site, like Josh said, has a pretty complex surrounding street configuration that includes pedestrian streets on 2 sides, really 3, and a system of one-way streets to the west and south of the Damon site. We're also working really closely with the landowner, which has included as a condition of sale the inclusion of a drive-through for the future project. That said, we worked hard to appropriately site that drive-through and curb cut, and we think we've arrived at a solution that meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance and the needs of this unique site. We do look forward to hearing the committee's feedback on this project, and with that, I'll turn it over to Johnny Noble from LJC to go through the plan. Johnny?
Thanks, Katie. And I hate to say it, but I think this is the older presentation. There should be one from May 11th that was sent. Awesome. Is that still says May 5th?
It might just be the date in the cover. This is the one that was received, I thought, today. Where I can leak there. You would be able to share your screen if you'd like, if that's easier.
Oh, can I share? Yeah, if I can share, I'll gladly do that. Okay, thank you. Okay. And I really only knew because I took off the tiny people that were on the roof. Okay, so here we go. So again, the site, as mentioned, was for 3959 North Lincoln and 3950 North Damon. It is a prominent site in North Center as a 6-corner site. And because of that, we felt that it warranted some great input from more folks. As Josh mentioned, it is the P Street on Irving, Lincoln, and Damon, as indicated in that this kind of purple here. And we are within 1,000 feet of the Irving Park Brown line, and there are a few schools in the neighborhood, and as well as up here by the orange, there's a new plaza as well in the community. So in terms of land use, it's obviously a commercial center right at that corner, and then quickly fans out to some residential, which has informed the mapping, as we'll see later. A few of the buildings around the site, just to the north of note, is number 1 is what we just call the White Building. That's at 3959 North Lincoln. That is a part of this project, and we received a lot of input from the neighbors that they'd love to make sure we keep that, as we have shown options that did not previously. To the south and east of our site, we have number 3 in the middle is a new development that was recently approved. That is a 5-story residential building with a setback on the top, and that helped kind of inform some of what we do as well. And as you've seen in these 2 slides, a lot of 4- and 5-story buildings near 60 feet tall. And we were asked, and we thought it'd be a good idea just to review a few. I'll go through these quickly. There's 5 slides of just some surrounding intersections throughout the city that include some similar elements that we're dealing with at kind of a complicated intersection. This is the 6 corners just down Irving Park to the west at Cicero and Irving and Milwaukee, where there are 2 PDs that have recently been approved. The tallest being 120 feet at number 2 here, a 10-story residential building. I think our goal for doing this study and for looking at a few of these corners is to see how height and density played a role in the future development of these interesting corners. CRG and LJC partnered a few years back on this 7-story multifamily plane development on Milwaukee and Armitage, kind of a similar case in which it backs up to a residential site and an alley. And at 7 stories, we were one of the larger ones in the neighborhood. And since then, along Milwaukee, it has seen a lot of growth as it's close to the western Blue Line stop here. We took a quick look at Milwaukee Division in Ashland. Of course, number 1 there, 1611 West Division, was one of the first TODs, and that they really pushed the height in the neighborhood. Previously, the CVS on the corner, the older building there, was by far the largest around. And since then, the planned development 1337 just down Division, which becomes a P Street after the Wendy's drive-through, it really kind of blew the doors off the height in the area. The last one, quickly, Belmont and Clark, the target there is an 8-story building that, again, anchors the corner well, and definitely introduced some more height and density into this neighborhood. Oh, sorry. Lastly is Upshore, or Uptown. We did a project called Upshore over on the right, and there's some more height to the east towards the lakeshore, and some of that height now is moving more towards the Wilson Red Line stop. This is a 10-story or 9-story planned development that's been approved at 103 feet at the corner of Broadway and Wilson. So the existing site is made up of a parking lot right now with a 6-lane drive-through and 4 curb cuts. At 3959 North Lincoln, there's a small parking lot that's accessed by the alley over here. So as Katie mentioned, we've been studying this for right around 2 years, and always in kind of this mapping stage, just trying to understand what the community would go for and appreciate on the site in terms of density. Most of them targeting a 5 FAR, which is already in the PD. And so we've looked at everything from 14 stories down to 2. The one that had the most legs down here on the bottom right was when we had a grocer tenant, the Amazon Fresh, as a 2-story building on the Damon site, and then we took the rest of the bulk and put it in place of the white building and went really vertical there, which we thought was an interesting solution. But the community in Alderman did not appreciate another grocer tenant, so that has since gone away. So really, we're back to all residential with a little bit of retail development. We've gone from, on the left, the really strong expression at the corner with more of a tower that steps way down, to, if we took that same lump of clay, that same area, spread it out over the site in 8 levels, we get what's in the middle. But of course, both of these are very large compared to what's around us. And we at the end of the day, kind of agreed that maybe not the best neighbor contextually in terms of scale for the community. So on the right, this is the most recent study that was shown, where it's 7 stepping down to 5 and is a 4 FAR is the target for this one. And since the very beginning, we've included kind of a little plaza element. It's been in the corner, it's been in the middle, it's been different locations, but there's always been this desire to hold a little bit of public space as part of the project. So I'll talk about that later.
I just want to interrupt and say you have about 10 minutes left.
Perfect, plenty of time, great. So where we currently are is the mapping on the screen in a few points. We're holding an imaginary line at the alley that is behind the commercial space, and trying to keep the bulk of the height north of that, and stepping from 7 to 5 as we neighbor the residential development to the west. That 5th floor also steps back on that 5th level to reduce the perceived height from Damon and from the west. You can see that with the green, we're sculpting the massing and deflecting it in towards that plaza. It ends up being a little more than 3,000 square feet, 30 feet by 90 foot plaza right there, just off the corner. We're also, carving away a little bit at the actual corner while holding the mass above, but taking the retail and setting it back to give a little more relief. It's a very busy corner. For cars visibly to see around the corner, as well as for pedestrians walking around the corner. So kind of carving that back, giving some relief there. And part of that carving also preserves the views of the current Fifth Third White building, which is something the community, is used to seeing in the neighborhood, and we were trying to preserve those views. Programmatically, retail along Irving, that turns a corner and fronts the plaza, and then to residential lobby and amenity on the ground floor. This is a good image to kind of see the S shape that is created when you kind of take that good residential bar, wrap it around our site. We get a terrace facing east and west. We, I think Katie mentioned it, we're pretty early. While we've been studying massing for a long time, we're fairly early in the architectural facade treatment part of the process, but we did want to introduce some of that just conceptually to get a sense of scale. So in the image on the left, you can see how the building folds in, creates the plaza, folds in with the retail as well to create the entry for residential, entry for retail, and the bank entry. On the right, you can see how the massing steps down and how a terrace is created by that S shape as mentioned before. In terms of the site plan, it's Fifth Third's land, and it's contingent on them getting a retail location here. Currently, it's also strongly desired from their end to have a drive-through access. So that is, the subject of that up for debate and whether or not there's a curb cut on a P Street. But right now we're showing a curb cut on Damon to bring the cars in, 78 cars, and then fronting residential lobby and amenity space on that plaza. In terms of that access, we're trying to be a good neighbor, and part of that was just studying what it looked like when it was alley only access on the left versus introducing one curb cut on Damon. The challenge we have is there's a lot of one-way. There's an interesting network of one-way streets behind us, which means coming from the east and the south, in order to access the alley, you have to kind of come up through Sealy and Hoyne and some not so convenient ways for the neighborhood. And so obviously on the right, that gets cleaned up a little bit. So there's some give and take in regards to the use of that curb cut. The site, will have 50% green roof. Some of that will be accessible terrace. As I mentioned, the S shape creates those terraces. In this roof plan, you can see some of the more deflection in the massing as we try to respond to the context. Just two or three more images here. This one, street level view looking at the plaza with some just character reference images on the right. The residential entry is undercut, the massing in right here. You can see the 5th floor step back gets the terraces, but brings down that perceived height quite a bit. So we're really trying to create an interesting dynamic plaza experience and really opening that up to the rest of the street. And you can see kind of a arcade that is created at the corner as we pull back the retail. If you're at the corner, you can see the plaza, make it a part of that pedestrian experience for the whole intersection. And we feel it's making a better corner than what it was. We did study did a quick solar analysis. Doesn't take much to recognize that when we're on the east side, we're going to block a little bit of morning light, but for the most part, the residential buildings behind us will get plenty of unimpeded light. And that's really it.
Great, thank you. So committee members, the floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicants. Please raise your Zoom hand and we will call on you.
Can someone start us off? Anyone that'd like to volunteer from the committee to share some initial thoughts?
Reed, you want to start? Sorry, John. I've been looking for a Zoom hand, which I don't
Oh.
seem to have one. So
Okay, that's fine. Just feel free to chime in if necessary. No
yeah,
problem.
I apologize. I didn't want to just jump in because I thought somebody else might want to. My comments are that I'm hopeful that the team can. Well, first of all, thank you for a good presentation and a nice explanation of the work. And I appreciate that. I'm hopeful that this team can revisit this with its neighborhood and its client groups, particularly as it relates to the issues of how to address the corner and with the bulk of the building. This seems like a lot of bulk on that site to me. That particularly in a neighborhood at that scale, it seems like a lot of bulk on the site. I think some of that may have to do with the kind of traditional double loaded corridor structure for the building, for the upper levels of the building, I should say, for the residential aspects of the building, and a kind of tortured double loaded corridor, I might add, and wondering if that might be reconsidered in certain places to narrow up or thin up the building a bit. And then, as I said a second ago on the corner, I really think that there could be a lot more attention paid to that corner, a slight bending of the building there to respect the historic building. I think is a very nice gesture on your part. But I think that the base level condition could do a lot more to respect that corner. There are lots of corner buildings all around the world. The one could look at it. I think the examples we've been looking at in the neighborhoods are not what I would call salutary, or buildings that make a salutary contribution to the city. In fact, I'd say that some of them are pretty minimal at best, driven mostly by return on investment rather than return on capital investment rather than return on urban investment and civic investment. And I think you've got an opportunity to do much more of that. I'd encourage you to look to European models for dense urban structures, particularly structures over parking, where the buildings, as I said, thin out because they're required to by law to get better sunlight penetration. And I think you could do the same without losing a lot of again, return on investment. I'll stop there.
John Ronan.
Yeah, I can go next. I came in late on the discussion on this one, and so I'll leave it to other people to talk about the beginning of that discussion. But the two things that kept coming up before I said anything was this location of the residential entry that we see on the left, and just the overall mass on the site and how it was distributed and how it related to the neighbors. If you go to slide 17. And so, or just show us the slide view so we can pick that one. Yeah. So the question became, we were looking at the page with the 6 proposals, and this is the selected one. How this building relates to the 5-story white building and the neighbors to the east and to the north and so forth. And we were trying to think of ways to get the density that the developer is likely requesting, but in a more urbanistically positive way. And a couple thoughts came to mind. One is, have you looked at possibly a courtyard building, a 5-story courtyard building, which would allow you to cluster units around an interior courtyard over the ground floor parking and create kind of an amenity space and perhaps put duplex units on that courtyard so that families could have access to that protected green space in the center of the project, which would be kind of conducive to family living. And also, could you study townhouses or something, bringing the residential to the grade on Damon Avenue on the north end of the project to better segue into the urban fabric to the north. Again, like how much is the retail really viable up on Damon there, and might bringing the residential allow you to lower the overall and reduce the overall mass of the building. I think also an arcade on Irving Park would be better than maybe projecting it like you have. It'd be more of do more to activate the street life in that neighborhood. But if that doesn't give you the density, the possibility of raising the tower, if there has to be a tall element, perhaps it's in the middle of the block, such as the 8-story tower-ish element in the image on the right there. Could that go taller, allowing you to reduce the surrounding mass down to 5 stories to match the height of the white building, perhaps, and perhaps to make a courtyard viable, maybe it can't be a 60-foot wide double loaded corridor, but might have to be a single loaded corridor on the east, or perhaps the east and the north. But how do we, how does one get the massing, the desired massing, but lower the perceived, reduce the perceived mass of the building on that site? And those were just 2 thoughts that I had to accomplish that.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting, and something we'll study for sure.
Thanks, John. I do want to call attention to the Q&A by Butler Adams. He states, San Diego is changing how height and density are used in TOD. Can the density on this bulk be reshaped more vertically? And then he provided a link.
I'm sorry, John, was that a question for the design team or just for everyone in general?
For everyone in general. That was our public comment.
John's suggestion to raise the center of the building yields a lot of opportunities, objections from neighbors who might be concerned about a 7-story wall or a 6-story wall of uninterrupted, unmodified wall of housing in a project like this might be much more comfortable with a 3 or 4-story facade of housing if it wrapped around a tower piece that was, say, 8 or 10 floors, so that the tower doesn't cast shadows on them in the same way. Also, the kind of flatness of the bulk drawing and the flatness of the architectural drawing that you submitted, I think could be changed quite a bit if you to enliven the facade and give the appearance of removing bulk. For instance, if each unit was rotated 30 degrees on center, or simply had a rotation, a shift of facade to orient a view in one direction or another, you can give the appearance of reducing the bulk without actually doing that. Our own Jeannie Gang in town has done that on several high-rises here in Chicago and elsewhere. It's certainly a precedent that exists and can be done within the limits of commercial development. But all of this is to go toward trying to remove some of the sense that this building is, a 10-pound package squeezed into a 5-pound bag.
Brian?
Hi, maybe I can add, I'm sympathetic, obviously, to the issues that you have run across, particularly working with the neighborhoods and department to put that FAR on the site. Early in the process, as you've been drawing, it's probably difficult to convey, the intended effect, which is simple massing models, because everything does look fat and bulky, right? But the idea that you had this nominally 120-foot wide site, which works with parking and all that sort of thing. You've taken basically this 60-foot fat noodle or bar and wrapped it in this S curve. It's not a bad partie, in terms of trying to maximize the amount of site with the length of what you are considering a double loaded corridor. But I think the committee is wary of, a process where you're just responding to neighborhood concerns, trying to get the thing approved, and not trying to think about improving the quality of housing in Chicago, making this an attractive place that people would want to come call home, and building a neighborhood hub with a housing type that would be very interesting and frankly just super livable. And so that entails many things in our minds. At the base, I think that there's lots of discussion about the bank and whether or not that bank would be there forever or that would be a great retail space. I think that there's a lot of opposition to blank facades that would be, or facades that would be dressed up to parking. And the idea that you might dedicate more of the bay, that one singular bay at Damon, to either retail or amenities to help activate the ground floor, or even this whole issue that you basically have one core with a big long S curve or S shape. That means that people are going to be walking down long corridors to get to the units, which doesn't seem to be, imagining, being there a pleasant experience. And so I personally have run into a little bit of this issue also, that how do you actually mass, this 5 FAR on the site? And I think, to me, issues of height are difficult to get around because of the motions of it, but you're going to have to prove that maybe that there are devices that you can use, gestures and massing, that you could actually have higher heights on the site that go above 7. So that it gives you some opportunity to do other things on the site to lower down the apparent mass from really the places that it matters, from the street, from the neighborhood, on the axes. And I agree with John and others in the group and Reed that I could see more mass either at Irving Park or in the center of the site. And, having the ability of a bar building to be single loaded at certain places and dropping down to double loaded other places where you might generate some additional terraces as amenities, breaking up the height, stepping it down as you go southward on Damon. I think those are all things you could explore rather than just say, well, we have a 7-story here and a 5-story here. I think it could be much more sophisticated, and you could develop ideas to break down that scale to basically create a more human scale. That is, I think, what everybody's looking for, especially on Damon Street. I think the one other thing I want to mention, I'm sure the traffic engineers and department is going to get into it, that this issue of the curb cut on Damon, there exists many of them now. I personally don't think that one single Cape curb cut would hurt. In fact, it might relieve some of the neighborhood circulation. But I would say that a drive-through to me is probably not a good thing, and that you should make that any internal connections between Damon and the northern part of the site not go through directly to the alley, but go through the parking garage and up by the other cross alley closer to Irving Park.
The applicant like to respond.
This is Jay Case, part of the development team. I think all these comments are thoughtful. You know, the design that you're considering today is a product of trying to address, you know, a number of competing factors. We like the idea, to be honest with you, of a higher building. At some point, you know, we were probably positioning it more towards Irving because it was more commercial at that end, but and a lower building in the rear and maybe a bigger public space in between, just in concept. We got a lot of pushback for any building above, you know, honestly, even above 5 stories. But a lot of the neighbors were looking at a much lower density. You know, the challenge is this building right now is 175 units. It's not a lot of units to support what we would like to deliver here, which, as everybody has commented on, is a very high quality building that lasts the test of time, building that has amenities that people are looking for in today's, you know, apartment environment. And so that's the tension. I don't think we would, for a minute, be reluctant to do a higher building along a portion and a lower building along the rest, but there are some practical limitations. You could contend that those are driven by economics, and certainly in part they are, but they're also driven by the desire to provide amenities for a building. You know, the building that was just approved across the street from us is Johnny, maybe you can go show that slide. It's essentially a non-amenitized building. It's 5 stories high. It's 2 blocks thick. And you don't see the site plan here, but it's basically the same facade on Damon and there's the same facade on Lincoln. They just have a thicker portion of the block to work with. No amenities in the building to speak of. That's what we were trying not to do. We were trying to create a sense of place here. Now, obviously, there's ways to be more artful, but the challenge is to accommodate the various you know, concerns, and height has been one of them. You know, while the neighbors were willing to accept 7, they've been very reluctant to accept anything over that. And even that has been a hot button. So that's just my response. We really are trying. I mean, we've looked at this a lot of ways, but there are some limits to what we can accomplish.
Thanks, Jay. We have a couple more minutes, but Anna, did you have a comment that you wanted to speak?
I just wanted to talk briefly about streetscapes. And, you know, I do think while you're trying, even I think along Irving Park, to have the step back so that the, you know, the facade doesn't seem so foreboding on that side. I don't think, you know, anyone is gonna think that you're not up against a tall building on that side. So I would really encourage you and the design team and whoever your landscape architect is to look at how to really make that Irving Park corridor, as well as Damon, of course, more pedestrian friendly. A couple feet setback off, you know, and I noticed that it's not laid on a survey, but really study what that spacing is, what that sidewalk width is along that street, make sure it ties into both sides. And, you know, I think the community is used to have a parking lot and an open space there and an open kind of corner plaza. I would encourage the design team to look at cutting back the corner, as everyone had said, a little bit more to provide a spacious area in that corner, since crossing there is really tight. And I think visibility from cars turning that corner is going to be kind of crucial. And so just please look at that a little bit more. A couple feet of landscaping on the lot line side may help.
Yeah, thank you. We're concerned about that too, for sure. So thank you.
I'd like to step in here and respond to what Jay was saying earlier. First of all, to thank him for saying that. I think that kind of language is probably very reassuring to the community and very reassuring to those of us on the committee, that you'd like to, in other words, that you'd like to aim for something better than that building that's being built not so far from you. It's not a very high standard to think that you could get better, to be better than that building. And I know that you all are already beyond that, well beyond that. But there are precedents and people doing work in the developer community that I'd recommend that you look at. I'd recommend you look at the work of Bjarke Ingels, Big. The company is called Big. It's an architectural firm. I know Johnny will know it. The work of Stanley Sadowitz in San Francisco. That's Saitowitz. The work of Jonathan Siegel in San Diego. And Jonathan Siegel is not only an architect, he's the developer of the work. And then right here in Chicago, you do not have to look very far. You could take a look at the work of Optima and the David Hovey Sr. and Jr. developers who are architects who own their buildings and work with developers as well as themselves, all of whom get where they're going by tending to move away from the kind of traditional tropes that we all use on a normal basis, such as the double-loaded corridor. American architects and developers are terrified of single-loaded corridors because they think they're inefficient, but they don't have to be. They can be more efficient because they can double as other activities. Furthermore, how you mass up a building, if you just imagine this building as more of a pyramid that stepped down from a center in all directions, rather than a snaky S shape. There's nothing wrong with a snaky S shape, but it's only one way to look at it. You can imagine talking to your neighbors and saying there's nothing higher than 3 floors around any of you directly, but the middle is bulkier and taller. So there are quite a few other ways to imagine doing buildings here. And when you have the kind of motivation that you've described, Jay, and what I hope are some of the kind of precedents that Johnny has a familiarity with as an architect, I think you've got a lot of other ways that you could look at this, but they may not have been the first thoughts. And you may have struggled a bit to balance the demands of a neighborhood or an alderman and the demands of economics. And we all tend to move towards things we know as responses. But there are, I think you all have opportunities to think outside the bent box, as it were.
Great. All right. Thank you all. So that said, I believe we will move on to the second item on the agenda. So the second item on the agenda is 12 West Maple, located in the 2nd Ward. It is a proposed 34-story, 449-foot tall residential condominium building in the Gold Coast, located on the north side of West Maple Street and less than a block west of North Rush Street, a designated pedestrian street. The building will contain approximately 54 units and will utilize transit served location, TSL, to allow for use of a motor court and car lift for 81 parking spaces. Amenity spaces will be located at the 7th through the 18th floors. Please proceed with the presentation and state your name prior to speaking. Thank you.
Josh, this is Katie from DLA again. I think we need Alan, Ben, Nick, and Mike promoted to panelists so they can kick off the presentation.
Okay, well, I have the presentation pulled up.
Or so they can start the speaking portion.
Okay, great. I believe Kamal will.
Thank you. Yep, I do.
Do you see them? Okay, let me know when we're good.
Thanks, Fern. Nick, did you want to go ahead?
Sorry, I'm muted. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Anderson with Fern Hill, joined today by with my partner, Mike Elch, as well. We're the founding principals of Fern Hill Development, a Chicago-based development firm. This is our first time in front of this design committee, and so we're pleased to be here and look forward to being back in front of you many times in the future. So the proposal we'll go over today is for the site at 12 West Maple, better known as kind of the area, the 3 lots that are immediately west of the Maple and Ash restaurant in the Gold Coast. Our architecture partner in design on this is the Lamar Johnson Collaborative as well, but a different team led by Alan and Ben. And so I know you want to hear from the designers, not the developers, so I'll hand it off to him and available for your questions.
Thanks, Nick. This is Alan Barker, architect and principal at Lamar Johnson Collaborative. Also my first time in front of the design committee, so happy to be here as well. As Nick has located the site next to Maple and Ash, just west of Maple and Ash, and also west of Mariano Park in the Gold Coast neighborhood. Let's go to the next slide, please. Here's the context. Directly across the street is, and to the south of us is Newberry Plaza. It's 550 feet tall. And we're actually looking directly at their loading zone across the street. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is how to increase or provide a better pedestrian experience on Maple Street. And then very, very shortly, we can go to the next slide. This actually speaks to it better. And then we're obviously very close to State Street and Mariano Park to the east. Because of the limitations of this site, we're only 75 feet wide and 100 feet deep north-south. The tower itself, once we get past the podium, steps back 15 feet from the east. So that's where we have the first amenity deck, and we'll get to that in later slides. But the tower itself is just 60 feet wide and 100 feet deep. We have an eccentric core that cores all the way to the left, to the west of the site, so that the west edge of the building is on the property line. So our primary views are to the east. Next slide, please. Programmatically, here on the ground floor, we do have a very small residential lobby. As Nick mentioned, this will be condominiums, so there's not a need for a large apartment lobby. We want this to be very, very high quality and adding to the quality of the street. And then in addition to that, we are requesting a curb cut. What that does is it brings traffic off of the street and hopefully alleviating some of the traffic and the parking and the lining up that is already happening on Maple, bringing that into the motor court for pickups, drop-offs, loading, deliveries, etc. And then the cars go out through the public alley on the north, and that's also where the loading would occur. And you can also see on the southeast corner of the site, we have a dedicated valet house as well. So taking a step back, we identified a dichotomy here. We're in the Gold Coast neighborhood, which is known for luxury and exuberance and grandeur. But what we're trying to establish here in these condominium units is a level of comfort and a level of home. And so how can we find both in the design and in the product that we're designing? And so we have this connection to the lake. That's one way we're gonna talk about it. But there's a lot of context in terms of buildings and history that we can refer to. But what else can we draw from here? And so we are looking at the context and history, like the Palmolive building and stone. And we don't want to do a glass tower here, but what can we learn or what can we draw from the shores of Lake Michigan and the ever-changing sand dunes and grasses? We wanted to incorporate something, essences of those ideals in the building. So it's really not about form, and it's not about mimicking form. It's about incorporating texture, detail, and specifically where the occupants, where the residents are, and pedestrians are engaging the building. So at the front door, at the lobby, you'll see we've paid high attention to these areas of interface, and then also at the unit windows and the unit terraces themselves. We're looking at detail and texture and material at those areas.
So February 10th, we had our first intake meeting with DPD. We were not talking about detail. We were just looking at big concepts at that point, and it was about views and our adjacency to the lake. And we're really designing from the inside out and looking at the unit plans, how they lay out and how it can inform the big picture, the big concept of the building. We looked at big terraces all around the building, and maybe they shift and move a little bit. We looked at still large terraces, but maybe the location of them are they move and change based on the context. And these were outboard terraces with lower and upper level amenity. And in that middle scheme, we actually had landscape tracing its way up the building. And then in the third scheme, we brought the terraces inside, and it was more about the mass of the building, and we would solve and add detail on a micro level. So the committee was, we talked a lot about landscape, we talked a lot about massing and the formality of this building, and we took those comments and progressed forward. And this is just to show we are looking at outside, the mass and the bulk and density of this thing, but we were really digging into the unit locations relative to the core and the views, how to incorporate balconies, what that texture and window treatment might look like. So it's really, going from one scale to the next, and hopefully the attention to detail will come through as we get into renderings. This is a more formal, more formalized diagrams of this. We started with a narrow, a skinny tower. We looked at where those view corridors would be to the southeast when we're below the Viceroy Hotel, which is directly to the north. Once we get up above that, the views open to the northeast. And so this carve idea came from back to the sand dunes, back to Lake Michigan, the sand dunes moving and shifting and carving, but also being held by dune grasses. And so the incorporation of grasses as a part of built-in planters, and attention to detail. Now on the far right, attention to detail at the window frames and at the terraces, the detailing of the terraces. They trace their way up the building. That, what we're calling filigree, is what is giving that third level of detail to the scheme. It's really not about the shape of this thing. The shape is informed by the units and the views, but then the extra layer of detail at the end is filling out the design. So here is view from the northeast and how it fits into the context of the neighborhood. You can see the thin profile, especially relative to Newberry to the south. Let's go to the next slide. And we took, this is from the southwest, and we took this angle just so you could see the west facade. Most of this honestly is the west side of the core, because we had to offset the core. But because it's really nestled in here on the block, this is the only view that would give us a full view of the west facade. And once we were able to get up above, I believe the 28th or 29th floor, and we go to single floor units, we stepped back a little bit to help designate the crown and finish the building off with step backs and views to the west. So this is the Maple Street facade. So we really wanted this to be a formal, luxurious, comfortable entry. And although we do have a curb cut here, it's just a slip in behind the residential lobby, and we want to bring these high quality materials down to the ground. Obviously we've maintained the tree pattern here, and we're introducing landscape here at the sidewalk. And even at the parking starts at level 2, and it's level 2 through 6, and we'll have plans just following these renderings. But we're cladding the parking in metal panel and then a textured metal panel. And then even at the parking, we've continued the the window openings with glass and metal panel behind.
Alan, I also do want to mention you have about 9 minutes left.
Very good. Thank you, Josh. This is the lower level amenity. So this is where we step the building back, and you can start to see, you can see where we've started to incorporate the native grasses on the unit terraces, very generous unit terraces. There's a level of detail that we've introduced on the unit terraces. And why don't we go to the next slide as well? And as we eclipse the Viceroy Hotel here, this is where that shift happens. So the predominant southeast views change to the northeast. That gives the building some balance or imbalance maybe. But these outboard balconies shift to the northeast corner. You can see that we also have balconies on the southeast corner, but they're inboard. So we did feel like it was great to keep most of these balconies inboard and behind the masonry facade instead of hanging them out. But we use that to balance the building, the mass overall. And then a simple crown up here, crowned with just a little bit of texture in the metal at the top, and then just a simple step back on the southwest corner and top. We've talked about the ground floor. The car lifts are incorporated here to get parking or to get cars up to levels 2 through 6. The parking floors, 16 spaces per floor, and 81 spaces total, including some of the ground floor spaces. Level 7 is where the building steps back. We have an interior and exterior amenity here. And so this is where residents would have view, they'd be able to occupy this exterior space and views to the east. And then here are the lower, on the far left are the lower level typical floors. This is before the shift above the Viceroy. We have an upper level amenity, or I guess a mid-level amenity at the level of Viceroy. And then those units shift. The units and the massing and the interior and exterior terraces shift at levels 19 through 28. And then we have single floor units at the penthouse to the top, which allows us to pull the building in a bit more and to top the building off in a crown. We're just outlining the materials here. We do have natural limestone at the base and carrying its way up through the podium and up to the amenity level. And then we'd have a textured cast stone similar to One Bennett Park for the tower itself. And then aluminum railing and glass window wall for the tower. Here's how the building height relates to its neighbors. I think the next slide is especially telling. Our closest neighbor directly to the south is Newberry Plaza at 550 feet. But we're really bounded by a bunch of density and tall buildings here. And then returning to the materials, cast stone is the bulk of the tower, but we want to utilize two textures: a smooth texture where the terraces are carved in, and then a more stippled texture for the body of the building. Natural limestone at the base, accented with metal panel, not only at the base and the parking, but also at the railings of the terraces. And here is, obviously, we would comply with the sustainable development policy, and this is how we would meet our 100 points. Josh, that concludes it for us. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Committee members, or any committee members that are associated with this project, please recuse yourself at this time. Otherwise, you'll be moved into the attendee level of Zoom. I cannot see if there are any
John's got
comments.
his hand up.
Yes,
Okay.
Yep. So I do want to say that committee members, please take a moment to review any comments received from the public in the Q&A box. I believe there's one from Butler Adams, and incorporate them however you see fit. I will go ahead and just vocalize it. Butler Adams, this reminds me of something out of mid-block Manhattan. Why is there a need for so many additional parking spaces versus units? I understand it's a high-end area, but are we rewarding money with greater parking ratios? The floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant, and I will begin with John Ronan. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh, maybe go to those typical floor plans. I think the conversation amongst the committee members was primarily about three aspects. One is the curb cut. Another one was materials, and the third was the blank wall that you're presenting to the neighborhood to the west. And it seems like that the blank wall is not necessary, and that if we look at these plans, you could simply flip the core and the corridor. Since there's only 2 units per floor, why not flip the core and the corridor, put the corridor outboard to the west off so that the corridor gets light and the elevator lobby gets light and views, and you still have the same access without compromising any of the area of the units. And you could, seems like a more condensed core pulled in from that west wall would be better for the neighborhood, but might also be better for the tenants who live in this building. I'll let others talk about the other issues.
John, that's a great comment. The flipping, obviously we can't take light and vent from that west side, but if it's a corridor, if it's just serving the core, we could certainly look into that, and it would definitely improve the west elevation.
We were wondering a little bit about why, just like the public comment was, why so many cars in this building relative to the number of apartments? And do you really need that curb cut? Could there not be, you got a public alley there, why can we not enter from the alley side?
The alley it's narrow. There's a lot of, there are ComEd poles, dumpsters from the adjacent restaurants. And it's not just Maple and Ash. There's the taco place on the corner. Very tough to have two-way traffic there. And, we believe it would cause more problems if we tried to have in and out from the north. And if we tried to force that, we believe that the pickups and drop-offs would inevitably happen on Maple Street. So what we're trying to do is just get everybody off of the street and read to your point, a curb cut is not, that's not where we would want to go first, for sure. But because of the circumstance, trying to get everybody off of Maple Street, we wanted to close that down and still provide a formal front door and front facade, and hopefully just slip people in there without in a discreet way.
Could you address the number of cars too? Number of spaces?
Sure. We found that the market is requesting 2 spaces per unit. That's one response. And then what I believe 6 floors of parking gives us is it allows us to have the amenity level clear the building to the east, so that amenity deck has eastern views as well. So it's twofold, but that's a market-driven metric. If we find that the market doesn't support that, I would imagine that the valet industry in the area could use it pretty easily. And so, I'm speaking for the developers here, but I can imagine these spaces would be used. Currently they're parking cars right in front of the 111 or the 1111 North Dearborn apartments for valet. It's kind of a mess down there right now.
Thanks, Alan. Sarah, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yes, just I wanted to continue the discussion a little bit about the west wall, not to harp on this issue too much, but I think the committee appreciates the massing moves and the architecture and the treatment of the balconies you've done on the rest of the building, and we'd like to see some of that same quality come around to the west, even if it's in a very small way, such as wrapping balconies or some kind of landscape around there a little bit more, or putting some natural light into the lobby, because the view from the buildings to the west to that facade is difficult. And it would be a lot nicer for the community to the west to see a little bit more than that and not to really turn back on the west side as much.
Sarah, duly noted. We'll start to address that right away.
Anna, I see your hand up.
Just wanted to talk briefly about ornamental grasses and how that is a concept throughout. I do have grave concerns about something that is in the private realm that is of an overall concept. And so since these will all be occupied by individual tenants and owners, I have, I doubt that the planting will stay as designed. And so unless you make that kind of mandatory, I also do question how the ornamental grasses are going to do underneath an overhang at the lower levels where there'll be much less light and as you go up and if the plant material changes. And so again, I have concerns about the viability of ornamental grasses in tenant spaces or owner occupied spaces that have kind of a concept to them for the overall building. And trees underneath overhangs really don't function well. Trees do need light and rain to hit them. You can't just rely on kind of irrigation at the base. And same with ornamental grasses as well. I think on the south side, it's probably okay, but I do have concerns about those. And so please look into the viability of that before that becomes an overall concept that doesn't work very well in the long run.
So we, like probably every architect at some point, thought it'd be a great idea to put trees all the way up and down this thing. And that was, one of our three concepts is, we wanted to just start to talk to landscape architects about that and then the committee as well. And we, like you, realized that pretty quickly that was a bad idea. But as we did talk to our landscape group about this, about the grasses, and talked about the balance between protecting those grasses from high winds and being up high on the building. So the balance between that and Hannah, like you were saying, being under an overhang. But I think that we can find a species that will perform well, and we've identified that. So we are doing just grasses and not trees up and down these balconies. We've talked about the depths or the pit depths for these for the planters, et cetera. And with regard to your question about upkeep, I think the difference here in that it's a condo development not apartments. There's going to be additional care and the ability for the condo association to regulate this and take care of these plants. We've done it before on other projects, not quite to this extent, but we've had grasses and other plants and planters immediately or only accessible from owners' units, and this has now been 6 or 8 years, and they've worked out just fine. So we want to pursue that again here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have about 10 minutes left in this discussion, but I do want to continue with discussion. Brian?
Hi, I just want to make a couple comments that, excuse me, that it's a building that would have great presence, on the eastern side by the park, Mariana's Park. And I think that the proportions obviously are very elegant in terms of slenderness, the simplicity of the kind of framed openings are pretty elegant with the double heights. But I think that beyond that, or in addition to that, I think the committee was very troubled by a building that had such great importance on that site, but it basically turning its back to the west. And I was just kind of curious with a couple of suggestions that John, made a very obvious condition of flipping the quarter, or we thought about if you could reconfigure the core itself to move it, more towards, starting from the west, but moving more towards eastward, so that you could wrap around units and get 3 aspects for those 2 units, or even the 1 unit per floor. How would you treat that property line condition? Would you try to do protected openings, or would you set back the tower further, or add terraces, or what are some ideas? And when you said yes, we'll look at that.
Well, the suggestion that we flip the core, or at least flip the corridor and the elevators, I think that has promise, because being on that property line, we can't take light and vent from those windows, or we can't take the vent. So that use would have to be, it couldn't be a bedroom, for example. So we'd have to be very careful without setting off the property line. We'd have to be very careful of what that.
But you would make that corridor still be glazed, so that you would see. Okay, so you can put windows in there, but protected windows, because it's on the property line.
Right. The property line, being on the property line is the challenge.
Yeah.
And if we could go down to one of the parking floors, because you can see that we're super tight here. We've got 15 feet. No, the last page.
I understand the 60-foot bay there. So right. I mean, part of that is, I guess, buildings that are in sensitive areas like this. It is about first, obviously, creating great housing, right? As you kind of described, can't remember, it was the cabin and the kind of urbanistic or urban cabin or cottage, and having great layouts, a sense of privacy, exclusivity. 2 units per floor is fantastic. Multiple access to light, views are all going to contribute to that. But being in a place and then thumbing its nose at its neighbors is not exactly being neighborly. And I think that kind of quality of fairness and respect to adjacent properties and really the city fabric is really important for you and your sponsors to consider. I know tall buildings have really specific requirements. I see that the tube frame, is a very effective way. So your core could really be anywhere in that location. And really what you're dealing with is property line conditions and extra cost to protect openings. So I really think that you should consider that, because the committee really is very troubled by a prime site like this, a building that would have a great importance than doing what it's doing on that west facade. Just one last thing is that I kind of think that in this day and age, when people say cast stone, obviously I think you're meaning precast concrete.
We are, yeah.
Okay. So it's not terracotta or anything like that.
It's not terracotta.
Precast concrete. So there are, opportunities with precast concrete to do things that are quite amazing in terms of aggregate, mixtures, colors, textures, form liners, all those kind of things. And for you and your group to really explore a way that you don't have to say, well, this is a second-class material, and we're going to dress it up at the base with travertine to have, just that lower section be something different. I think that if you could develop something incredibly beautiful with the precast, that then potentially becomes more robust or really has an integrity to it. I think the committee really would like to see a project that did have integrity on this important site and that height really be as good as it could be for our age.
I really appreciate that comment and this discussion, because it's important to us as well that just because it's cast stone or it's precast, that we don't lose the detail and the texture, and that's something that we'll be working to maintain.
Okay.
It's not only that, Alan. It's the idea that you've got an expensive material on the ground floor. Well, a perceived expensive material on the ground floor or the base. I mean, sorry, 3, 4, 5 floors, and then you switch to the money-saving material on the upper floors. I think Brian's looking for, when he talks about integrity, he's looking about integrity all the way through the building. So when you make a gesture, it flows through the building, like you've been talking about with the metal panel becoming the terraces, so that moves all the way through the building and creates a language. The other part about that is if you've got limestone, real limestone at the base and cast stone above it, they're going to age at different rates because the materials age at different rates, and the building's going to end up being 2 colors, one at the podium and one above. And you can see it in building after building after building where they've done exactly that. And so I would, just to put a finer point on this, I would encourage you to either take the limestone all the way up or to take the cast stone all the way down, and be creative and consistent, or to use Brian's perfect word, to bring integrity to that same kind of integrity all the way through the building.
We have John Ronan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, cast stone is a developer's term. Like architects should not be allowed to even use that terminology. One last thought. I was just thinking, could you turn vis-a-vis this west, trying to bring together the parking issues and the west facade? It seems like you could even turn the core and run it east-west, because most of the floors are units on the south, a unit on the south and a unit on the north. And then maybe the planning department says, okay, well, you can have the visitor parking enter. You'd split the parking too, of course, right? But maybe the visitor parking is entered off of Maple and the resident parking is entered off of the alley. And then you could turn those car lifts 90 degrees. So when you come in to the parking, you're going right into the car lift. And the core is running in the middle. It doesn't go to the west or the east property line, but it's in the center. And then your penthouse at the top is a continuous unit that goes around the core, which is actually the nicest layout there is, rather than the kind of train car enfilade layout. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there's some other variations of that we could look at too, including clustering the core, so it's more of a knuckle.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't all the way east-west, but you know, this discussion of flipping or rotating or shifting the core is something that we'll dive into for sure.
Yeah, I think they need to take advantage of the fact that there's only 2 units per floor, which that's the freedom that maybe we feel is not being fully explored here.
It'll also save you from having, particularly on, let's say, the 19 through 28 bay that you're showing here, pretty deep units there from front to back. It could help you not have that whole thing that's more than 30 feet deep away from the edge, away from the eastern edge.
Reed, you're right. We don't want to go too deep, but because they're condos and not apartments, that depth helps us to a degree. So there is a sweet spot.
Yeah.
But I think that a flip and a shift or a ball, I think you're right. It could eat up some of that inefficiency that we probably have at this point.
Okay, we are about at time for this discussion, unless there's any other comments. If not, we will now move on to the third item on the agenda. So thank you.
As we're doing that, just a point of order, I think, Sarah, are you going to recuse yourself for this?
Yes,
section?
I will.
Or-
So I'm
okay.
going to hop
Thank
off
you.
at this point. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then whoever is running the third item's presentation, please feel free to share your screen.
Are you going to share it, Richard, or would you prefer I?
I'd like to, if I can have control, please.
All right, so the third item on the agenda, the Roseland Community Medical District Plan. The Department of Planning and Development, with support from Alderman Anthony Beal of Ward 9 and Alderman Kerry Austin from 34th Ward, and the Roseland Community Medical District Commission, procured a consultant to create a plan for the Roseland Community Medical District in the Roseland neighborhood. The planning process included a public engagement effort to understand area needs, develop a shared vision, establish project goals and objectives, and cultivate support and consensus for the recommended improvements and vision within the medical district. The study area is bounded by Eggleston Avenue to the west, 110th Street to the north, Edbrook Avenue to the east, and 112th Street to the south. Please proceed with the presentation and state your name prior to speaking. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Wilson. I lead the city design practice of Adrian Smith, Gordon-Gill Architecture, and thank you so much for your time and attention today and your service to the city. We have a pretty extensive presentation PDF that we shared. I won't speak to every slide, but we'll give you a high-level overview and glad to cover any material that you're interested in. So I have the great honor to lead an outstanding team, and I'm probably most excited with DPD for going a bit outside of the box here, of really engaging with people that live and work in the neighborhood as part of the team with the Far South CDC, the Greater Roseland Chamber of Commerce. It really made a difference in terms of having very deep personal relations with people across the neighborhood, both in terms of residents and businesses, and then outstanding talent with other firms. I won't read the narrative, but summarily, this is a master plan for a 95-acre medical district on the far south side of Chicago. It is a historic location of the South Michigan Avenue commercial corridor that was really the economic anchor together with the Roseland Hospital for many years. But of course, area downturns and disparities in healthcare really highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic really brought to life the essential need for community-based access to healthcare in neighborhoods across Chicago. So this master plan, we are on a process here. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share design and get feedback before we do our final products, but we are on course to try to wrap this by June so that the implementation activities hopefully can proceed. Josh described the area that's here, but I think most importantly, it's just to highlight here that this is a district that's served by 2 stations of the planned Red Line extension. It's immediately adjacent to the Pullman National Monument and also served in terms of access by the Metro Electric and directly located between 2 major federal highways, 94 and 57. So terrific location potentially for access to a broader area. It's interesting, there is legislative authority for this medical district. So, medical district, some cases mean a lot of healthcare. In other places, it means that you are enabled by the state legislature. So we are one of these, the small one, but our medical district commission has the responsibility to meet the healthcare needs of residents in the area, and they're empowered with abilities to negotiate enter contracts with service providers, actually have a land acquisition authority, eminent domain ability, and also an interesting power such that they can grant and partner with neighborhood organizations to deliver on the longstanding community development needs outside of pure medical service. This was pretty, amazing to look at the service area and recognize that we are in an area that serves about 300,000 people on Chicago's far south side with 12 community areas and 6 zip codes. And it's just been a bit shocking to understand by the numbers how the hospitals and medical care is receded, and really truly the lack of service that people have access to in this area. So we really had an amazing, engagement with the community and local business owners to really talk about what a medical district means to them. We had a series of community vision discussions. We had a great interactive design workshop. We developed some large-scale models. We kind of went outside of our planning area and worked with CTA to understand the Red Line extension, potential infill station area plans. to really tie those back into the function of the medical. We also had benefit not only working in tandem with the CTA Red Line extension, but also with the major Far South Chicago community area quality of life plan you may be familiar with through LISC and a number of area partners here. You know, first and foremost, there is a need to prioritize the community's access to high quality care, something that they actually have access to in terms of its location, but also seeing this as a major opportunity for economic development, job creation, and reinvestment in the community and housing in the area. Another thing that we've been able to do through the planning process is a series of major meetings with large and medium scale service providers to introduce the area, to understand how if there's a collaborative relation between the medical district and existing healthcare networks, and then hopefully to build partnerships such that they understand through the medical district master plan the opportunity that's in place here, and could come down and partner in the delivery of care in some way. What we're learning there through these discussions with the major networks is a real focus away from, you know, building large-scale new hospitals and new beds, but rather investing in the societal determinants of why people need healthcare in the first place, providing local access to outpatient care, and really kind of meeting those needs locally. We benchmarked a number of neighborhood medical district campuses and service provider interviews, and really a recurrent theme was the need for a mixed-use program that is heavily weighted on outpatient goods and services, but also has an element of retail, culture, education, fitness, access to local food, to round out, you know, not so much of a focus on a medical district, but about the creation of a support for a healthy lifestyle within the area. So a program that we tested is about 200,000 square feet of mixed use program. Physically, talked about the location here in the area, and adjacency to Pullman National Monument. We have kind of a beautiful large scale Olmsted Brothers Park. We have the area between 115th and 111th that is the historic Michigan Avenue street wall of old businesses. And if you're not familiar with it, I encourage everyone to come down and see it. It's truly amazing. However, it's also truly in distress. So one of the big goals of the medical district master plan is to create some catalytic investment and drive foot traffic and collateral investment and activation of the Michigan Avenue corridor alongside the medical function. We're primarily situated in the middle of a pretty dense urban neighborhood, but we have historically have this deep parcel depth between Michigan Avenue and State that's zoned for commercial activity. And we also, unlike the hospital, that's very much landlocked in terms of access on 111th, we have the benefit to use stronger regional access from State Street and Michigan Avenue to accommodate a larger build out program and the functions of the vehicular traffic and access that would be required for that. When I saw this image, it was kind of shocking here. So these are vacant lands and buildings, and you just see this tremendous swath that runs from Michigan across our study area. What I came to understand was this really was one of the oldest settlements in the Chicagoland area. In fact, it predates Chicago. So this is the area of a high concentration of wooden frame homes that over time deteriorated and have been lost, whereas the areas adjacent to it were built in later subsequent phases, more brick and stable. So what in some ways, you know, is a kind of terrible thing that we see vacant, it's actually an opportunity for us as we have nearly 3 blocks of vacant land in a great location adjacent to transit, adjacent to the hospital that we think is a real key to unlocking the value and delivering on this longstanding need. So I'll go through the collaborative vision that was developed working with the Roseland Hospital, with the Roseland Medical District Commission, and area stakeholders. So there's a real desire to continue to invest and improve access to quality care in terms of Roseland Hospital. but also to develop an outpatient campus to round out provision of those medical needs in the area. And then to use this for community revitalization of the commercial corridor areas you see here in the light pink, and also help drive infill residential development and community amenity development adjacent and throughout the district. So Roseland Hospital, they have a goal to build a new surgery center facility and childbirthing facility above their existing emergency room that you see here. So their board of directors working with the state are pursuing that action. So we help them illustrate and understand and support their application on that process. In terms of the medical district and the commission charged with implementing this plan, their focus is really turning to the acquisition and preparation of land on 3 large city blocks between state and Michigan. Each one of the sites is approximately 2 acres. And then in phase build out to take the material in this master plan to go forth in an RFP solicitation process with project partners that we've interviewed thus far to solicit a response and visioning of how partners might take this down. But we're envisioning phase 1, the real address being on 111th and State, and then subsequently building to the south in phase development. It's also notable that there are a number of other vacant sites adjacent to the district that we would hope over time would be able to fill in with new supportive housing and other community service and needs in the area adjacent.
I just want to mention that we have about 9 minutes left. Thanks.
Very good. Yep. So this gives you a sense of the kind of the scale of the ultimate build out of the district. So these are the conditions today. So in terms of massing, we tried to have multiple buildings on a block. We tried to step from low height that responds to the height of Michigan Avenue upwards to the new address at State and 111th. This is currently 111th and State, so really having the primary access, address, and identity of the complex on these major streets adjacent to Roseland Hospital. But also taking care not to have large street walls. So as you look down the massing of State Street, which is across from the residential neighborhood, that we're stepping both in terms of height of buildings, but also with the street wall stepping back and forward here so that we have a massing that reads as a collections of buildings that has a better relationship to the adjacent residential areas. Another view here, as I spoke earlier, hoping that there's a major infill site, kind of a famed site that burned. Unfortunately, the Gately site, old department store, and the idea that we could pursue a mixed-use development there that had some medical function, but also retail and community congregation function, and really kind of orient that along 111th Street to connect the medical district over to the park. Very quickly, we have packaged a set of design guidelines to guiding engagement with potential partners. So I described our strategy. We have an interesting street network in the south area where we have place streets that terminate at Michigan Avenue, so they're not through east-west streets. And then our streets are the ones that provide continuous east-west connectivity. So the big idea here, the red major addressing streets, that we use the blue streets, the place, to provide for the vehicular access to parking and services for the campus, and that we really try to drive a pedestrian environment along State Street and then the green corridor over to Michigan Avenue and to Palmer Park. We would envision really giving the identity of this district with an edge for medical services at 111th and State, and to the extent that we could continue to wrap that to the south is envisioned. And then introducing other community core programs such as health, recreation, food, supportive housing in the core area wrapped by the medical uses. We have a concept of not only improving the streetscape around the perimeter edges, but providing an interior courtyard scenario here, such that the buildings can have a semi-secure controlled space for workforce and patients that are here in courtyards and plazas. And then also major investments in streetscape in the public realm around the facility. I'll just flip here, trying to provide guidance about key points of breaking down the mass and providing clear definition of street edge, ideas of the building use mix at a guideline level, kind of talking about the typologies of buildings that we would see on the street, the arrangement of addresses, primary, secondary facades, major entrances, and then again, typology by residential use. And then finally, the community's did a good bit of visual preference survey. And so the community sees itself as traditional with materials such as brick, wood, glass. They would like kind of a fresh identity, but they want to kind of be rooted in the building blocks of the community on the outward facing of the streets, and then in the internal courtyard, perhaps opening that up more to an environment that has a different look, feel, and character on its interior. Major key locations, major doors, and public realm. And then finally, really trying to tie this back into great ongoing investment. So CDOT currently is investing, has plans to invest about $20 million in streetscape in 2 phases. Phase 1, the orange area that you see is in Pullman along 111th Street. The second phase will be on 111th and on Michigan Avenue. So this provides us opportunities for a couple of pocket parks or special kind of moments within the streetscape program tied to the layout of the master plan I just described. Great interest to try to link over to adjacent amenities such as Pullman National Monument, over to Big Marsh Park, and south to the Little Calumet River with kind of major unfolding improvements celebrating African American heritage in that corridor, and providing more access to kind of recreation opportunities that in the area that unfortunately today are fenced and unavailable to the community. So that concludes a very quick walk through the master plan presentation. And again, thank you so much for this great group of design professionals to actually take time to consider a planning project and to be at a point where you could influence this final phase where we polish and produce our materials. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I guess at this time, any committee members that are associated with this project, please recuse yourself. The floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant. Please raise your Zoom hand if you have one, or feel free to just chime in. Thank you. Yes, Leslie.
Thanks, Josh. Richard, thanks for your great presentation. This is such an exciting project. I'm really happy that you've taken on this challenge, and I appreciate the level of detail and explanation that you went through during your presentation. I guess a couple comments that I had specifically just about the land uses and building uses for a portion of the master plan. I noticed that there was a housing component within the new, one of the new blocks that you're creating. I believe this is supportive housing. And one of the, I guess a comment and a question. One is, I know that some of the community organizations working in the area have, as a part of their vision and mission, a concerted effort to infill many of those, plethora of vacant sites with new housing. And as you described, that the character of the streets is diverse and has an opportunity to carry a little bit more density than just single family homes. I also think that the new medical district can be a catalyst to move some of those projects that have already been in process forward, and that there's an opportunity to, with this investment in the medical district, kind of, it'll have tentacles for other community development organizations to build new residential, for private investment, and a whole variety of other catalytic development within this area that has been, bereft for many years. So my question is, why is it important to have housing within the new medical district master plan, as opposed to allowing these project partners who've been extremely active in this master planning process, sort of, partner with them to take on some of that aspect of it and create, have a broader impact in the adjacent neighborhoods, with the idea of, even furthering the vision that you've already created with the medical district master plan.
Very good. Thank you for those comments, Leslie, and questions. Specifically, why there's a housing component there came out of direct interviews with the potential service providers that need a proximity for their federal funding within the services that they provide. So wanting to understand how that could fit within a linear distance, frankly, of the facilities. And so the supportive housing, there's a big focus on adult behavioral and youth behavioral. So some kind of near-term and safe haven housing for transition, with the idea that there would be kind of transitional housing in the adjacent area, in the area that you described that may not be technically within the medical district perimeter, but a great candidate for infill of some of the major sites that we have there. I think it's also, just so much opportunity and need to fill in housing here, and it's far beyond the ability of a medical district commission to meet that need. So what we're excited about is the ability to partner with longstanding service providers, and even the ability to participate financially through the medical district to help them fund and deliver housing across the neighbor, infill, rehab of existing housing that's there with neighbors. So no shortage of opportunity. It's been a very robust conversation around that. But in terms of the master plan, we just wanted to show the ability to integrate it in the vision, since we know some of the major providers that we talk to have that need. The plan does not break if there is no supportive housing. And then on the other part is there's even a strategic component of like nursing or workforce housing as a kind of an attraction strategy to get near-term investment of a workforce back in the area. So a lot of interest in housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe Ronaldo, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and Leslie, and first of all, Richard, great work, as always. And Leslie actually touched on, some of the elements that I was going to dive into. I actually do think there's tremendous synergy. You mentioned, given the need for supportive, housing services, particularly around behavioral and mental health. I see that being, very synergistic, frankly, with the medical district's, broader vision. And so yeah, I'm sold personally and convinced, on that tevering and on that connection. So I won't belabor any of the other points because I think Leslie, articulated them cleanly. I'll also simply say, again, I've sat through a few of these, since this, committee was formed. I have to compliment you and the broader, master planning group. This is probably the most robust assembly of community stakeholder talent, that I've seen. Again, these are people that I know that I've, worked with. I live proximal, to this district, about a mile due west, of this district. And so it's an area that I know well. And I know the players involved. And so, certainly the right collection of talent, and personalities was assembled to bring to bear the right vision. And so again, I think the group is to be commended, and you're to be commended for shepherding. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anna?
Hi, Richard. It's good to see you. I had a couple comments on kind of the character and where your green spaces are. I think there was a diagram that kind of showed where you were thinking about these connector elements. What I think, looking at the community benefits of the space, how much I think there's going to be cross traffic. I would really encourage the design team to look at a way that the green spines can be really more along community corridors, and at the very least thoroughfares that the community can use to traverse between key spaces. And what I mean is that I think right now a lot of the green spaces feel more like interior courtyards or kind of campus connectors. And I'm wondering if some of those spaces can be really brought out to the public right of way, whether it be kind of health trails that the community can use, pleasant landscaped walkways that can be really kind of signifying an advancement of the community public realm within this area. If the courtyards can maybe be facing more towards residential spaces, and not so much that kind of the occupants of the space would be able to look down in it. I think a lot of the times when we have these hospital courtyards, they start to become a little bit, and especially when they're interior and very dark, they tend to not be as occupied as we would all like. And so I think, making them thorough spaces where the community can really use them as a park, feel like it is more their space instead of the hospital, maybe of more community benefit than kind of what's shown as a campus.
Yeah,
Hey, Rich,
I
sorry,
appreciate
can you-
that.
Rich,
A
can
lot
you-
of that was driven from also a safety and security concern of hearing from residents that have not the ability to leave the hospital to go to a drugstore without being followed and robbed. The challenge they have moving, between kind of service providers, even in a small locale. So, and then even the workforce needing, so it's a delicate balance there. We want energy and investment and activation on our perimeter. We see the CDOT investment is key to that. We do have kind of introduced definitely a public park at 112th in that corridor. But in any event, I just wanted to respond why that feature is there. It is a campus connector. It is, so thank you for the comment. Perhaps there's a balance that we need to bring forward in terms of the intent of how we present the idea and strive to have the major investment on the exterior public realm perimeter while also providing variety for safe, secure access between whatever is built.
Rich, are you able to pull up the relevant slides as we discuss them, just so we have visuals to kind of match whatever we're discussing? Or perhaps maybe Erica wants to take over control, whatever would be easiest.
I can flip through them, absolutely.
I think, Richard, that absolutely makes sense. I think Renaud had also kind of addressed the concern about the community and the security within this area. And so I think perhaps there's just another layer. I do think it would be a little bit of a shame if all of the buildings were lot line to lot line, I guess. And so, if we can provide a little bit more room to create a really great pedestrian experience, it really benefit the community.
Thanks, Anna. I believe, Brian, your hand is next.
Hi, Richard. The first time I've had this week to look at the project, and I'm very impressed by the process and really the engagement with so many people in the community to come up with ideas and not only just build consensus, but for you folks to try to put something together that made sense of all those different ideas in a kind of cohesive master plan. I think that, building on Leslie's and Hannah's questions about the other programs besides the hospital and the 3 State Street sites, is that my question was, how will some of the first phase interventions try to really jumpstart, catalyze, make this thing really happen? And it just seems that some of those yellow areas that were defined in the master plan as development sites tend to isolate the hospital with the 3 State Street sites. So obviously, you probably, you and your team probably recognize how important those infill sites are to provide that sense of, critical mass in the first phase, connectivity. Is there infrastructure that starts to connect all the sites early to create value? So people, get a sense that, yeah, this is the place to start to build housing and to build retail and build places for food, all the things that a medical district, really wants. And I made the comment earlier to the committee that, when I read the kind of slides, the director of the IMD, really talked about, what IMD is about. It's not just healthcare, but it's all the clinics and outpatient MOBs, food, housing, hospitality, to make it a vibrant sort of campus. So I think that to me, the kind of those yellow areas and the kind of infrastructure that connects the blue to the red are pretty important to describe in your master plan.
Very good. Absolutely agree.
All right. Is there any other comments? We have a few minutes left. If there are any last comments. If not,
I would just pitch quickly. What I was so excited about having the opportunity is not only, the professional input here, but it's just to have a chance to bring some more visibility to this project. I look at the talent on this call. I've been to projects you've done in neighborhoods where people said it could never happen, and seeing the transformative power of investment in those neighborhoods. So I just ask you to keep an eye on this, send people down here. We'll share this with you. We've just got to find a way to make this happen. Your, life expectancy is more than a third less in this area. You're 6 times more likely to die if you're a pregnant female in this area. Service providers are gone. What I've learned through this process is what we're doing is we're backfilling care for these neighborhoods with millions of dollars, but we're providing them to places like University of Chicago or Northwestern so that they are guaranteed to take your patient if there's a need. So in other words, not taking those millions of dollars at the state level or the county level and investing them in the neighborhoods where people can actually have access to the care they need. So that's our greatest aspiration here, is to show what's possible, really be advocates, take the opportunity to talk to everybody we can here and try to make something happen. So I just want to give you a little emotive thank you and a pitch here that if you're interested, if you know somebody, we would love to talk to you and see if we could help the community move this forward.
Well said, Richard. Well said.
All right, thank you. So before we adjourn, on behalf of the DPD, thank you again for all of your critical thinking and thoughtful comments on these 3 important projects. The meeting will now come to a close. Thank you for attending and sharing your thoughts, and we hope you will come back soon. Thanks.
Thank you.